When I left my hometown, I had no idea what kind of future awaited me. It felt like walking into a thick fog, uncertain of my direction but sure that I needed to keep moving forward. I thought I was leaving behind a life of comfort, only to realize it was built on lies and deceit. With no clear plan, I wandered aimlessly until I came across a small town that seemed as lost as I was. The quiet, the simplicity, and the chance to start over strangely appealed to me. In those early days I craved a new beginning more than anything. I didn't have much to my name, but that didn't matter. I had to distance myself from the past, so I grabbed an opportunity most people overlooked, a rundown gas station. It wasn't much, but it offered a blank slate to rebuild my life. I knew that here, far from everything familiar, I could finally find some peace. The first thing I did was build a spacious retail store at the front of the property, facing the fuel pumps, intending to meet the town's needs. After the local grocery store closed at 7 p.m., I modified the pumps for self-service. To do this, I relocated the storage tanks, making the pumps visible from the store and freeing up ample parking space in our large lot. From 7 p.m. until midnight, those became our busiest hours. The convenience store operated 24/7 THS, while the garage in the back opened from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on weekdays. I often came in on Saturdays for special projects. The bar wasn't thrilled when the store began carrying basic booze. It was like most small-town businesses, you wouldn't get rich quick, but it provided a good living and added much-needed jobs to the community. Each year we managed to save more than most. With little employment outside of farming, most young people left town as soon as they could. After some restructuring of the store's merchandising, thanks to a woman I hired, the business became successful quickly. It repaid the investment I had made as a shareholder's loan, and we doubled the staff because of how busy it got. On Friday and Saturday nights we sold a lot of junk food to people leaving the bar, trying to sober up before heading home. Sundays were popular for selling cold beer at reasonable prices. I was sipping a double shot of Jack Daniels with a glass of iced water and a lemon slice on the side, having just finished replacing a steering column in an old truck. It was a family heirloom, his pride and joy. It took me 8 months to find the part and I had to hand fabricate some attachments. His family had driven that truck since the 40s, and he wasn't about to let it go. If he had his way, I thought he'd be buried in it. Between 4 and 7 was the best time to be here in the bar. Most of the regulars would be having supper soon. The place would fill up with the music crowd when the band started. The farmhands brought the farmer's daughter for fun and afterwork entertainment. In the 6 3/4 years I had been here, I built a solid reputation and made many friends. Most locals watched out for each other and would tip each other off if something unusual happened. I came to the bar once a week, always on Saturdays, at the same time for my one and only drink before heading home. It was my downtime, a moment to gather my thoughts in peace. Then I saw them walk in. I wished I hadn't. They ruined the end of a perfect day. I could still recognize them anywhere, anytime. And I wished I hadn't. The woman was my ex's twin sister and the young man with her. I once called him my son. It brought back memories I'd rather forget. It reminded me how you can't see evil when you're living with it. Since I last saw him he had grown. His appearance had changed a lot. He was starting to look more like his biological father. It proved to me that eventually the truth comes out. But why were they looking for me now? They went straight to the bartender and spoke with him for a few minutes. I watched her pull out a picture from her purse and show it to him. The bartender said a few words and I watched them turn and walk out the door. I was thankful for my long unkempt hair, full beard and mustache, which gave me a completely different look, especially since I had lost the extra weight. No one noticed the text I sent out. They're back. Be home when I can. About half an hour later the bartender came over and sat down. What did they want, Tom? I asked. They're trying to get a message to you. They heard a rumor you were living here and wanted to check it out, Tom replied. They said someone named Willa is dying of cancer and doesn't have much time left. They're looking for you because she wants to make peace. I asked to see a picture of you, pretending I didn't recognize your name. Who are they and what do they want? I lit a palm all red 100 after ripping off the filter. The woman is my ex-wife's twin sister. The young man is my ex's son, whom she passed off as mine for years. Based on your reading of people, what do you think? I asked. Are they telling the truth this time? Judging by their body language, he said, they seem to be trying to be honest, but they're definitely hiding something big. I nodded. My ex-wife and her sister had always been masters of deception, showing you one face while stabbing you in the back. He got up and returned to his spot behind the bar. My thoughts drifted back to nearly 7 years ago. When I left that day, I told them I wouldn't be back for 7 years. They laughed at me like I was some kind of fool, and to them? I guess I was. They learned the hard way that day. It was the last time they saw or heard from me directly. They didn't believe I was serious or that hurt. They thought I was just angry over some prank they had pulled. Little did they know that a few weeks earlier, I had found out our youngest was actually my brother-in-law's son. That revelation set me on a path of discovery, leading to where I am now. At that time, they had no idea that a family member had given me proof, saying she'd seen me get betrayed by Willa and Tammy, the evil twins as she called them, one too many times. To her, they were black witches practicing pure evil. Earlier that week, we found a newly acquired insurance policy on me with double indemnity for accidental end of life. If I died by accident, the payout would be $4 million. The Grand Dame warned me to run for my life. When I walked out to my work truck that day, they had no clue it was already packed with everything I wanted from our 16-year marriage. I drove down the driveway, turned right onto the county road and never looked back. By the time I stopped driving, I was 2 states away. I'll admit I was partly to blame. I knocked Willa up when she was 16 and I was 18, just finishing high school. My family convinced me to do the right thing, so we got married that summer. Soon after, 2 more kids came along. They were still laughing about what they had done to me. Willa told our daughters, "Your dad will be back once he cools down. He really needs to get a sense of humor." A couple of hours later, my wife saw a sheriff's department vehicle pull up to the front of the house. She went to the door to greet him. "Are you Mrs. Willa Racine?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Ma'am, you've just been served," he said. "With what?" she asked, laughing, thinking it was some joke. When she opened the legal envelope, they all learned the hard way just how much I knew. I heard through the Grand Dame that my wife was devastated to find out I had ended our marriage without a second thought. My lawyer and I had listed all our assets and debts. The DNA report showed it all. The affair had lasted for a year. The divorce petition included times, dates, locations and hotel receipts, even listing the credit card charged. The informant had even provided photos of the couple in action. Tammy, my wife's twin, had played a role too, babysitting our kids so Willa and her lover could carry on their affair. Inside the envelope at my request was a sealed letter. When Willa opened it, her sister, who was present, learned I was suing her husband for back child support, marital interference and slander. That's when the laughter stopped. Suddenly I wasn't the joke anymore. I was the one getting the last laugh. Their ongoing joke was that the only thing I was good for was making money. Everything I did seemed to turn to gold and create cash flow, so Willa and the kids were spoiled rotten. Later that afternoon, Willa found out I had sold the 3 businesses I built from scratch and paid off all our debts. Even the 2 apartment buildings we owned were gone. I sold them for a good profit. I canceled all the credit cards and removed my name from all the bank accounts. I signed over my half of our home to her, and took half of what we were worth in cash. All that remained was for her to agree to the divorce. By doing that, I cut our cash flow from about 10 grand a month to 0. Sadly for Willa's sister, she also learned the cost of using me. My lawyer took them for everything they had before they got divorced because of the damage I had caused. He froze their assets before they were even served. Once their divorce was finalized, they were both ruined. My lawyer called Willa's sister back to his office and reimbursed her with a quarter of what they lost. "Why is he doing this?" she asked. "My client never cared about the money," my lawyer replied. "For him it was always about principle, something you and your sister clearly lack. By giving you this money, he hopes you'll learn from this experience and have a chance to start over." Willa refused to finalize the divorce until she spoke to me in person, so we remained legally separated. I had no desire to speak to someone who had lied to me for years. She had to work for the first time in her life. It was a new experience for her to learn how fast money disappears when none is coming in. My lawyer forwarded anything important to a mailbox I rented at a FedEx retail shop. Once a week they sent everything to my business address. I did this on purpose because I knew, given our history, their schemes would never stop. The two sisters loved to play with human emotions and manipulate everyone around them. Knowing them as I did, I knew they would plot their revenge. It wasn't a question of if, but when. In their family, walking away was not an option. It would drive them crazy if they couldn't find me. The longer it took, the worse their payback would be. Until now, I thought I had outsmarted them. But with Tammy showing up, I knew their game wasn't over. I finished my drink and headed home through the back door just in case they were watching the front. I crossed the empty lot behind the bar, circled around the block, and used the back alleys to reach my pickup truck. As I was unlocking the door, a man stepped forward. "You're a hard man to find, Mr. Arthur," he said. "Seth Racine, I presume," I replied, turning to face him. "What makes you say that?" "My name is Peter Edwards." "Your eldest daughter Connie is my wife," he said. "Well, that could be a blessing or a curse for you," I replied, depending on how much she takes after her mother. "So why are you here and what do you want?" "I came looking for you," he said. "There are some things from the past that need settling." "They would be if your mother-in-law would just sign the divorce papers," I replied. "What divorce papers?" Peter asked, looking genuinely surprised. I told him to get in his car and follow me. A few minutes later we left the main drag of town, turned right, and drove about a mile before making a left turn into a long driveway. I stopped at a farmhouse and led him into my home office. I pulled out my divorce file, turned on the printer, and told him to make copies of anything he needed. Peter didn't need to know this wasn't my actual home. I had built it for the Grand Dame, hoping she'd one day want to move from her paradise. Peter was a nice-looking young man, about 25, with professionally styled hair. He carried a natural self-assurance and seemed well-educated. But the question was he who he claimed to be, and was he part of Willa and Tammy's scheme? He used my Wi-Fi password and uploaded everything from my computer to his laptop. As he sifted through the documents, he focused on the sheriff's department report Willa had signed the day she was served. The only thing he printed was the letter from Willa's lawyer to mine, which contradicted something he had believed. He showed no signs of knowing the truth he was uncovering. "Do you think Connie knows?" he asked. "That's a question you'll have to answer for yourself," I replied. "But I have a question for you. Is Willa really dying of cancer?" "Who told you that?" Peter asked. "Tammy was in town today with Seth, looking for me," I said. "That's what they told a bartender I know." "She's fine and living common law with her former lawyer," Peter replied. "She's currently pregnant with his second child. She asked me to find you so she could start the divorce, claiming she wants to remarry." He pulled out his cell phone and called his wife. I could hear her voice in the background. He then turned on the speaker so I could hear the conversation. "Connie, did you know that your mother lied about the divorce not being started?" Peter asked. "What are you talking about?" Connie replied. "You know our dad skipped town because he was going broke just after he left that day? Us kids weren't home when Mom found out. Later Mom told us that it seemed our deadbeat dad had walked out on all of us. She and Aunt Tammy said he cleared out everything before he left town. If it hadn't been for our stepdad we wouldn't have made it. I'm sending you a legal file. Get my sister to watch our baby," Peter said. "Then get back to me once you've read it." As they continued to talk, I got up and grabbed 2 bottles of Bud, opened them and placed one in front of him. "Why didn't you tell my daughter you found me?" I asked. "Connie and I have been married for almost 2 years. She gave birth to our son 3 months ago. For now, I'm not telling anyone I found you," Peter replied. "As far as anyone in the family knows, I'm working long hours investigating a case." He opened his wallet and showed me his badge, proving he was a police officer with the Paradise Police Department. I opened my laptop, navigated to my hometown's website, and clicked on the police department's page. It confirmed he was telling the truth. "It was that fender bender reported a few months ago that gave me the lead to find you," Peter explained. "Connie filed a missing person report on you, which got forwarded to a watch for list. The insurance company informed me about the settlement in your favor. So why didn't you tell Connie you found me?" I asked again. "After reviewing your detailed file, I realized something else might be happening," Peter said. My first question was, what happened to the $250,000 Willa was supposed to have received on top of the house deed? The second is why everyone is lying about what really happened. Sounds like someone's been fed a pack of lies just like I said. His cell phone rang. It's my wife. I'll put this on speaker, Pete said. So, keep quiet. Hi dear, Connie said. Where did you get all of this? Is it real? If it is, we've all been lied to for years. Seth has no clue about his true parentage, just like I didn't. My sister Karen is going to be shocked. Mom always defended our dad so much that they're no longer speaking. This paints a different story from the lies we've been told. It looks like Mom and Aunt Tammy left Dad no choice. They've been playing with his life behind his back for years. And what's worse, the divorce isn't finalized because Mom won't sign off on it. Makes me wonder what's really going on. It's real. I got the information directly from your father's lawyer's widow. I had to go out of state to find it. It seems her husband kept duplicate records on his home computer, Peter said. Thankfully he did. The files show that your mother was served the divorce papers the same day your dad left. I scribbled a note. Tell Connie to speak with her great-aunt Josie if she's still around. Peter nodded in agreement. Pete, finding my father is now more important, Connie said. At the very least, to get the divorce finalized for him, he deserves to be free from my mother and her schemes. What happened to the money she got? If she owned the house, why did she have to sell it? The more I look at these facts, the more I ask what the hell was going on. And why was she planning to sue him for desertion when she found him? I have an idea. Have my sister watch our son a little longer. You go see Aunt Josie and tell her what we've discovered. Maybe it'll make her open up, Peter suggested. For now, let's keep this between us because there might be a strong case of fraud here. The real question is why. Your mother has slandered your father for years. This is something I need to discuss with the district attorney. That $250,000 cash vanished after it left your father's lawyer's hands. One last thing. Don't even tell your sister, not yet. If the DA decides to investigate, it's better that no one knows anything. I got up to grab a couple of refills, giving them some privacy to finish their conversation. Why do you want Connie to talk to Aunt Josie? Peter asked. Josie was the one who gathered all the information on Willa and George's affair, I explained. She was never married, but she kept an eye on the extended family like a mother hen while raising her only daughter. Being a single mother changed her perspective on many things. She always believed Tammy and Willa had conspired to orchestrate everything. Both George and I were being used, but their ultimate goal is anyone's guess. If that's true, then why? Peter wondered. Josie's granddaughter Jody has been asking her to move in with her for years, I continued. Josie always said, not until the truth comes out. We see Jody when she visits town with her two sons. Jody lives a very private life just like I've had to. Dealing with the Withers sisters comes at a high cost to everyone around them. Willa and Tammy have been manipulating people for most of their lives. It wasn't until Josie gave me the evidence that I began to see it. Do you have any questions about your children and what's going on in their lives before I leave? Peter asked. No, not until I'm convinced you are who you say you are, I replied. Given the family history, this could be another part of their game, and you might be following their instructions. You should look into my lawyer's sudden end of life. If she plans to sue me, what makes her so sure she can win? Peter went pale, realizing the kind of people he had married into. For the first time, we decided to trust each other enough to exchange phone numbers. He promised to keep me informed if he learned anything new. I stood up, walked him to the door, and shook his hand as we said goodbye. Once he left, I cleaned up and locked the place down. I took the long way home, making sure I wasn't followed, giving me time to think things over. My life has improved greatly since leaving the past behind. Did I really want to dig it all up again? Could Willa and Tammy be plotting some long-term revenge just to get the upper hand? Knowing them as I did, I knew I had to be prepared for whatever was coming. If they had run out of money, they'd do anything driven by greed to get more. As soon as I walked through the door, two little munchkins clung to my legs. I bent down and picked up my two little ones. At 3 and 4, they were the apples of my eye, just like their mother. Go wash up. Dinner's almost ready. My common-law wife, Jody, called out. I gladly obliged. During dinner, I told her everything that had happened since closing the shop. I never could have imagined how much my life would change when I left paradise for good. Almost 7 years ago when I left town I had promised Josie, Jody's grandmother, that I'd stay in touch, and I did. I made it a habit to call her every other Sunday. It had been a year and a quarter to the day when she called me needing my help. Her granddaughter was in a troubled marriage and needed a safe place to start over. Jody was 10 years younger than me back then and had no children. I didn't know much about her since she lived on an army base out of state. But I owed Josie and was glad to repay her for everything she'd done for me. It took me a week to find a 2-bedroom apartment and partially furnish it for Jody. Finding a place in a small town is almost impossible, but I managed it thanks to a friend of a friend. On the night I went to pick Jody up, she quit her job, emptied her bank accounts, and packed her belongings. Her husband was going to be served as soon as he returned from his latest military assignment, a 2-week intensive training exercise simulating real battle conditions. He would be away from home for the duration. It was around 8 in the evening when I arrived at her address with the U-Haul truck I'd rented for the one-way trip. I had flown in discreetly, without anyone knowing. With the help of a few of her neighbors and friends, we loaded what she wanted into the back of the truck. I was in and out of her town in under 4 hours. When people asked where I was from, I refused to answer, simply saying, "For now it's best that no one knows." Jody and I began to get acquainted during the drive back. It was the middle of the night when her grandmother called. I smiled when Jody answered, "Yes, Grandma, he picked me up. You could have warned me that he looked like a wild bushman who might clean up nicely if he put in the effort." The next day Josie contacted Jody's lawyer, arranging for all legal documents and communications to be sent to my FedEx mailbox. Jody had warned us that her soon-to-be ex-husband would likely cause trouble. I took proactive steps to protect her. In time we would both realize I was right to be cautious. Once Jody settled in, she took over managing my convenience store. Within weeks, she showed me that it truly needed a proper manager. It turned out to be one of the best decisions I ever made. She had a natural talent for it. The changes she implemented with my approval significantly improved the store's success. She put customer needs first, and her warm personality attracted new business. She worked closely with each staff member, assigning responsibilities and setting up codes of conduct. This turned the operation into a smooth-running business with no staff issues. Josie had to file a restraining order against Jody's ex due to his ongoing verbal threats. His actions after Jody left led to his dishonorable discharge, forcing him to move back to my old hometown, thinking that's where his former wife would be. Being new in a small town made Jody the center of attention, and to fend off unwanted advances from single men, she kept wearing her diamond ring. It provided her with some protection, and gave her time to adjust to her new life. Within a few weeks, Jody was handling all the banking and catching up on the bookkeeping. She was accepted by everyone because I had introduced her to the community. Jody was beautiful in every way, but it was her honesty and personality that stood out to me. She quickly sized people up with her long, straight black hair pinned back. She had a warmth that made her perfect for cold winter nights. I thought she would be a keeper for whoever she eventually fell in love with. When people asked who the lucky man was, she'd reply, "I'm sure you can figure that out for yourself." That simple answer sparked rumors. Soon, everyone believed we had met online, and she became known as Art's future mail-order bride. On Saturdays, since I worked alone, she started bringing me a lunchbox. I'm the type to get so engrossed in work that I forget to eat, and as a result I'd lost a lot of weight. During this time, our relationship began to grow. Within weeks, people assumed we were a couple. If one of us was invited somewhere, they automatically assumed the other would be coming along. Neither of us had been looking for a relationship, but we naturally fell into one. Josie kept us updated on things back home, and we found it amusing when we heard Jody's ex was in a friends with benefits situation with Tammy. The day Jody finalized her divorce was the day we took our relationship to the next level. We spent the night celebrating at the local watering hole with friends, while dancing a slow dance under the dimmed lights. We shared our first kiss. 6 months later we moved in together. While the kids were bathing and getting ready for bed, I placed the small bathroom wastebasket in the sink and shaved my beard and mustache down to stubble. My children watched in awe. I took the bowl and brush Jody had bought me for Christmas, lathered up my face and then did the same to them, much to their delight. Jody walked in just as I began to shave, her blue eyes sparkling in surprise. Our two little boys' faces were lathered up too. All three of them watched as I finished what I'd started. "Looks like Daddy's going to look like you with a clean face," Jody teased. "Should I cut his hair too?" The kids shouted yes. I laughed and said I could get the barber to do it on Monday. "No, I'm going to do it myself before you change your mind," Jody declared. After drying and dressing the kids for bed, they sat at the kitchen table watching their mom cut my hair. By the time she was done, I looked human again. There was more hair on the floor than what remained on my head. I barely recognized myself in the mirror. I told Jody she had done a splendid job and headed to the shower to wash off the stray hairs while she cleaned up. As I showered, her grandmother called. My daughter Connie had just left. Jody got the impression that Josie was preparing for a fight when it came to her sister's family. Josie seemed ready to take them down. Connie left her great-aunt's place with the knowledge that each of my 3 children was supposed to receive an annuity of $600 a month in lieu of child support, which I had set up through Mutual Life. None of them had ever received a cent. It turned into a wild night. If I had known shaving and cutting my hair would turn Jody on the way it did, I would have done it much sooner. For the next week I had to endure jokes from everyone who knew us like, "Who are you? And what did you do?" People asked Jody if she had to blackmail me to make me join the normal side of society. Jody, ever the jokester, replied, "I promised to force him to take a bath at least 3 times a week." Most people caught the humor. Some didn't. It was interesting to learn how things were going back in paradise when people believed they were above it all. The bird of paradise informed me that I was going to be sued for abandonment, desertion, and back child support in civil court. Jody and I found this hilarious. They thought that if they got a judgment, they could hire a collection service to track me down. When the male stork delivered the news, he thought it was a joke. His boss and the district attorney had even hired a lawyer to represent me. He explained they were using my situation to buy time and gather more evidence. Peter estimated that Willa and Tammy had stolen over $48,000 from each of my children. They were now re-examining my former lawyer's sudden end of life with a fresh perspective. Jody's ex-husband had become a person of interest in the case. Reviewing the cold case as I had suggested, the accidental end of life was now an open criminal investigation. If their findings were accurate, Willa and Tammy could face 7 to 10 years in state prison, and Willa's ex-lawyer, now her common-law husband, could be disbarred. Since he was the one filing the suit, they had to let the scam play out for charges to be filed. The lawyer hired for me would be paid by them. They wanted to gather all the records. I had to come forward at the end to give them time to build a stronger case against them. I looked in the mirror, half-jokingly checking for the word "sucker" branded on my forehead. For a couple of weeks, we enjoyed peace and quiet. Then, Josie called us on Sunday night with some news. The paperwork was set to be filed on Monday. She emailed me everything she'd collected over the past 7 years. She had gathered a mountain of notarized statements, video-recorded personal conversations about what had been going on, and the names of 3 or 4 lawyers she recommended for a countersuit. What stuck out like a sore thumb was a $2 million accidental insurance policy on me. Neither of us had known it was still active. That explained where some of the money had gone. Jody learned that it had been taken out 6 months before I left. Jody and I spent half the night reviewing and forwarding all the information to the district attorney. We both now believed this whole thing was a setup to lure me back and take me out. The next morning, Jody called all the lawyers Josie had suggested and chose one. We emailed everything we had to them, along with a large retainer fee. As soon as Willa's team filed their writ, I would follow up with mine and have them served before they could reach me. Friday morning, Jody called me. "Josie is on her way here and bringing guests," she said. "They left Paradise on Thursday night, stayed at a hotel, and will arrive sometime tonight. They left under cover of darkness in case they were being watched." This told me things were coming to a head. Jody and I decided it was best to close the shop on Saturday and make it a true long weekend for the sake of family. Peter was driving, bringing Connie and their son. All Connie knew was that they were coming to see Jody. It was almost 7 in the evening when we saw the Ford Explorer and an Escape pull into the driveway. We could see 4 adults in the vehicles. As they approached, Jody saw the worried look on my face and squeezed my hand. My truck was parked in the garage, so they wouldn't know I was there. We watched them get out of their cars. "Who's all with Josie?" Jody asked. "That's Peter, his wife, my eldest Connie holding their baby. And Karen, my second oldest," I replied. "Are you ready for this?" Jody asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered. I picked up our oldest child and Jody, lifting our youngest into her arms, opened the front door. United as a family, we stepped out to greet our guests. I was the last person my daughters expected to see. Karen immediately burst into tears. I handed my son to his great-grandmother and pulled Karen into my arms, holding her close. Connie, after passing their son to her husband, came over to me as well. It took a few minutes for emotions to settle down. Both of my daughters had grown into beautiful young women. Seeing them standing there side by side created a memory I would never forget. "It's good to see you again, Peter," I said, shaking his hand. After the introductions, Jody served up a huge dinner. It was a good thing she'd prepared extra. A prime beef shoulder roast, mashed potatoes, gravy, fresh homemade buns, Yorkshire pudding and green beans. The meal was topped off with hot apple pie fresh out of the oven. Once our kids were settled in, we began discussing everything. "First off, Art, is it alright if I call you Dad?" Peter asked. I nodded in agreement. "Then, Dad," Peter continued. "The district attorney now believes Jody's ex's car was involved in the